My friends, please lend me your attention. When I first met young Napoleon Hill, I saw in him a spark, a desire to understand the mechanics of human achievement. I told him then, as I tell you now, that no man becomes rich by his own efforts alone. Wealth, in its truest and most enduring form, is the byproduct of a character forged in the fires of service and a mind disciplined by a singular, holy purpose. We live in a world governed by cause and effect. To expect a harvest without first tilling the soil and planting the seed is not merely folly, it is a violation of the moral order. You see, the accumulation of great wealth is not a matter of chance or luck, as the idle like to claim. It is a science. It begins with the realization that your mind is the only kingdom over which you have absolute, undisputed control. If you cannot master your own thoughts, if you cannot direct your internal energies toward a specific end, you will forever be a leaf caught in the wind of other men's ambitions. I have watched many men climb the ladder of success only to fall because their foundation was built upon the shifting sands of greed rather than the solid rock of integrity. A man's character is his destiny. If you seek to build an empire, you must first build a soul capable of sustaining it. The first great lesson I imparted to Mr. Napoleon Hill, and the one I wish for you to internalize today, is the necessity of a definite major purpose. A man without a purpose is like a ship without a rudder, a drifter, a waif, a nothing. You must decide with absolute clarity what it is you intend to do with your life. This is not a vague wish for success or a hunger for money. Money is but a shadow. Purpose is the light that casts it. When I was a young lad in the cotton factories and later a telegraph messenger, I did not simply wish to be out of poverty. I resolved to master the machinery of communication and commerce. I made it my business to know more about the business than those who employed me. I ask you now, what is your lighthouse? What is the singular aim that keeps you awake with a fever of anticipation and pulls you from your bed with the dawn? If you cannot name it, you are merely existing. But once you have named it, once you have consecrated your efforts to a noble task, the very elements of nature seem to conspire in your favor. This is the mastermind at work, the coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. No individual has ever achieved great success without the cooperation of others. To lead is to serve, to command is to inspire trust. In my years in the steel industry, I did not need to know every technicality of the hearth or the rail. My talent lay in surrounding myself with men who knew more than I did, and in creating a spirit of harmony that allowed our collective intellect to flourish. Trust is the currency of great enterprises. If your associates do not trust your word, if they do not see in you a man of unwavering principle, your empire will be nothing but a house of cards. You must earn your independence slowly through the patient mastery of your craft and the relentless pursuit of excellence. There are no shortcuts in the school of life. Every step must be earned. Every dollar must be a certificate of service rendered. Consider the law of increasing returns. When you do more than that for which you are paid, when you go the extra mile with a willing heart and a keen eye, you place the world in your debt. Most men work only as much as is required to keep their positions. They watch the clock. They count the minutes. Such men remain small. But the man who performs his duties with the spirit of a master, who seeks always to improve the quality of his output, will soon find that he is no longer seeking opportunities. Opportunities are seeking him. This is the moral mathematics of success. Service multiplied by excellence equals inevitable advancement.
We must also speak of the responsibility that comes with such advancement. I have often said that the man who dies rich dies disgraced. By this I mean that wealth is a trust fund given to an individual by the community to be administered for the benefit of the community during that individual's lifetime. To hoard is to stagnate, to give is to live. But one must give wisely. It is far better to build a library that provides the tools for self-improvement than to give a handout that encourages idleness. We must help those who are willing to help themselves. We must provide the ladders, but the men must do the climbing. Character is not something you are born with. It is something you carve out of your daily choices. It is the result of habit. If you habituate yourself to honesty, to industry, and to the disciplined control of your emotions, you become a magnet for all the good things life has to offer. But if you allow yourself to be governed by fear, by doubt, or by the petty jealousies of the world, you shut the door on your own potential. I spent many an hour with Napoleon Hill discussing the 12 riches of life, and you may be surprised to learn that money was the last on that list. The first was a positive mental attitude. Without a mind that looks for the lesson in every failure and the opportunity in every hardship, 1,000,000 gold coins would be a burden, not a blessing. Patience is perhaps the most difficult virtue for the modern soul to grasp. You live in an age of speed, yet the great laws of growth remain unchanged. The oak tree does not reach the heavens in a day. The steel is not tempered in a moment. You must be willing to labor in obscurity, to perfect your character when no one is watching, and to trust that the harvest will come in its own time. Financial independence is not a sprint. It is a steady, purposeful march. It is earned through the accumulation of small victories, the victory over an impulse to spend, the victory over a moment of laziness, the victory over an unkind word. As we begin this journey together through these lessons, I ask you to set aside the cynicism of the world. Do not look for the trick or the secret that requires no effort. There is no such thing. Instead, look within. Examine the quality of your thoughts and the direction of your will. Are you a master or a slave? Are you a creator or a consumer? The path to success is open to every man and woman who is willing to pay the price in character and service. I have walked this path, and I tell you, the view from the summit is worth every struggle. But remember, the climb itself is what makes you a man worthy of the heights.
My information, dear friend, is drawn from the very ledger of my life and the works I penned to ensure that the lessons I learned were not buried with my bones. I speak from the heart of the gospel of wealth, where I laid out the moral duties of those who find themselves stewards of great fortune. I draw from the empire of business, where I detailed the practical mechanics of industry and the spirit of the young man who wishes to rise. Furthermore, I lean upon the collaborative philosophy I shared with Mr. Hill, which he later organized into the 17 Principles of Success and the 12 Riches of Life. Now, let us turn our gaze toward the second great pillar of achievement, the Mastermind Alliance. I have often observed that the man who attempts to do everything himself is destined for a life of mediocrity. You may have the strength of a lion, but a lion alone cannot build a railroad or span a river with steel. True power, the kind that moves nations and reshapes the face of the earth, is born from the harmonious coordination of effort. When two or more minds come together in a spirit of perfect peace and mutual trust, a third mind is created, an invisible force that possesses far more insight than the sum of its parts. In the early days of the Carnegie Steel Company, I was surrounded by men of exceptional talent, men like Charles M. Schwab and Captain Bill Jones. They possessed technical knowledge that I did not. However, my contribution was the creation of a mastermind environment where their brilliance could flourish without the interference of petty jealousy or friction. You must understand that harmony is not merely a pleasant sentiment, it is a rigid requirement for success. Friction in a machine leads to heat and eventual breakdown. Friction in a human organization leads to waste, bitterness, and failure. I charge you to look at your own associations. Are you surrounded by those who sharpen your intellect and bolster your spirit, or by those who sow seeds of doubt? You must choose your partners with the same care you would use to select the foundation stones for your home. A mastermind alliance requires a shared purpose and a total absence of ego. If one man seeks only his own glory at the expense of the whole, the alliance is poisoned. But when you find a group of individuals who are willing to submerge their personal vanities for the sake of a common goal, you have tapped into the very source of creative power. Cooperation and trust are the great multipliers of results. In my journey, I found that a man's word must be his bond, and his integrity must be beyond reproach. If you cannot trust the men in your alliance, your energy will be dissipated in watching your own back rather than looking toward the horizon. This is why I have always placed such high value on harmony in human relationships as one of the true riches of life. Without it, your material success will be a hollow victory, a banquet served on a table of thorns. Furthermore, you must realize that this alliance is not merely about taking, it is about the willingness to share one's blessings. A leader who hoards knowledge or credit will soon find himself leading an army of shadows. You must be the first to give, the first to praise, and the last to take the credit. By elevating those around you, you elevate yourself. The mastermind is a reservoir of strength that you can draw upon in times of trial, but you must constantly replenish it with your own loyalty and service. Wealth, when pursued through the mastermind principle, becomes a constructive force. It is not something stolen from others, but something created with others. This is the difference between the scavenger and the builder. The builder knows that by creating opportunity for his fellows, he ensures his own prosperity. We are all threads in a single tapestry. When we strengthen the weave of our cooperation, the entire fabric becomes resilient against the storms of economic change. Consider the 12 riches of life I shared with young Hill. You will find that financial security is placed at the very end. Before a man is fit to handle gold, he must possess the capacity for faith, the hope of achievement, and the ability to understand his fellow man. If you lack the character to maintain harmony, no amount of money will save you from the poverty of a lonely soul. True independence is earned slowly, not through clever schemes, but through the mastery of these human laws. As you move through your day, ask yourself, am I building a mastermind, or am I merely a solitary drifter? Seek out those whose virtues complement your own. Align your purpose with theirs. Treat every person you meet with the respect due to a potential ally. In doing so, you will find that the doors which once seemed locked begin to swing open of their own accord. Success is a social phenomenon. It is the harvest of a life lived in productive, harmonious relation to others.
Let us now descend from the heights of grand alliances to the inner chambers of the self. I told Napoleon Hill that the man who would govern an industry must first learn to govern the small, unruly kingdom within his own breast. This is the third great lesson, the law of self-discipline. You may possess a definite purpose and a brilliant mind, but if you lack the iron will to direct your emotions and impulses, you are like a steam engine without a safety valve, liable to explode at the very moment you are most needed. I have often said that a man who cannot control his temper, his tongue, and his appetites is a man who has handed the keys of his life over to his enemies. In my journey from a bobbin boy to a manufacturer of steel, I encountered countless provocations. There were competitors who sought to undermine me, and laborers who did not yet understand my vision. Had I reacted with the fire of anger or the bitterness of resentment, I would have clouded my judgment and lost the path. Instead, I learned the art of the cool head. One must look at every circumstance, no matter how trying, with the detached eye of a scientist. Self-discipline is not a punishment you inflict upon yourself. It is the ultimate form of self-love. It is the ability to say no to a momentary pleasure so that you may say yes to a lifelong ambition. In my books, I have written extensively on the empire of business, and I tell you plainly, there is no room in that empire for the man who is a slave to his habits. Whether it be the habit of procrastination, the habit of overspending, or the habit of negative thinking, these are the invisible chains that keep men in the dark pits of poverty. You must take an inventory of your daily habits. Do they serve your definite major purpose, or do they scatter your energy to the four winds? I have always maintained that the master of his fate is simply the man who has mastered his own mind. Your mind is a fertile field. If you do not consciously plant the seeds of discipline, the weeds of doubt and indolence will grow of their own accord. You must cultivate the habit of initiative. Do not wait to be told what to do. If you see a task that needs doing, do it with such excellence that your superiors or your clients are compelled to notice. This discipline extends to your speech. A wise man listens twice as much as he speaks. In the halls of commerce, I found that the man who reveals his plans too early often finds them thwarted. Keep your own counsel. Let your results speak for you. There is a quiet power in the individual who moves through the world with a calm, disciplined exterior, for it signals to all that he is a man of substance. This is what I call enthusiasm under control. Enthusiasm is the fuel that drives the engine, but discipline is the track that ensures the engine reaches its destination. Furthermore, we must discuss the discipline of the purse. Financial independence is not found in the size of one's paycheck, but in the gap between what one earns and what one spends. In my youth, I lived on a pittance, yet I always managed to save a portion of my earnings. Why? Because the habit of saving creates a sense of confidence and a reserve fund of character. It teaches you to wait. It teaches you that you are the master of your desires, not their servant. A man who owes no man anything and has a small sum laid by can look the world in the eye with a courage that the debtor can never know. Service, patience, and mastery are the fruits of this discipline. If you wish to be a master of others, you must first be the most obedient servant of your own principles. When I spoke to Hill about the 12 riches, I emphasized that a disciplined mind is the second greatest wealth, following only a positive mental attitude. Without it, even if you were to inherit a fortune today, it would be gone by tomorrow, for you would lack the container to hold it. As you conclude this hour of reflection, I ask you to identify one habit, just one, that stands between you and your higher self. Perhaps it is the habit of complaining or the habit of half-hearted work. Resolve here and now to bring that impulse under the dominion of your will. Do not seek to change your entire life in an afternoon. Instead, win the small battle of today. The man who can conquer himself for 24 hours can eventually conquer the world.
My friends, we come now to a principle that many find uncomfortable, yet it is the very forge in which the soul of a leader is tempered. I spoke to Mr. Hill at length about the benefit of adversity and defeat. In your modern world, you are taught to fear failure, to flee from it as if it were a plague. But I tell you, in the empire of business and the school of character, failure is often a blessing in a very thin disguise. Every adversity, Every failure and every heartache carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. I remember well the panics and the crashes that shook the foundations of industry during my rise. I saw men of great talent lose their courage and their fortunes because they viewed a temporary setback as a permanent defeat. They did not understand that the universe tests us not to break us, but to see what we are made of. If you have a definite major purpose, a defeat is nothing more than a signal that your plans were perhaps not quite sound. It is a divine invitation to go back to the drawing board, to refine your mastermind, and to strengthen your resolve. You must develop the habit of looking for the lesson. When a bridge falls, the engineer does not weep and give up his profession. He examines the steel, he recalculates the stress, and he builds a stronger bridge. So it must be with your life. If you lose a position, if a venture fails, or if a friend betrays your trust, do not indulge in the luxury of self-pity. Self-pity is a poison that corrodes the will. Instead, ask yourself, what knowledge have I gained from this that I did not possess before? Patience is the sister of adversity. I have found that the greatest successes often lie just one step beyond the point where most men quit. The difference between a master and a drifter is that the master knows how to wait out the storm. He knows that the laws of compensation are always at work. If you have rendered honest service, if you have kept your integrity, the world must eventually pay you back with interest. It is a moral certainty. Consider the story of the many men who labored in my mills. Those who rose to become partners and leaders were not those who had the easiest path. They were the ones who, when the fires were hottest and the work most grueling, showed the spirit of the conqueror. They took their defeats and used them as stepping stones. I told Hill that hope is one of the 12 riches, but hope without the backbone to endure defeat is merely a wish. You must have a faith so grounded in your purpose that no temporary shadow can dim your inner light. Mastery is earned slowly. It is the result of thousands of small failures that were turned into lessons. When I first started in the railroad business, I made mistakes that could have cost me my career, but I did not hide them, nor did I repeat them. I mastered the cause of the failure until I became the master of the situation. This is the only way to earn true financial independence. It is not given to the lucky, it is claimed by the resilient. We must also learn to distinguish between temporary defeat and permanent failure. The only time you truly fail is when you accept defeat in your own mind and stop trying. Until then, you are merely being educated. The greatest men I have ever known, men who built the very fabric of our civilization, were all graduates of the school of hard knocks. They wore their scars like medals of honor, for they knew that a man who has never faced adversity is a man who cannot be trusted with great responsibility. So, when you encounter a wall, do not turn back. Search for the loose brick, build a ladder, or wait with patient confidence until the path opens. Your character is being refined in the crucible of challenge. If you can maintain a positive mental attitude while walking through the valley of the shadow of defeat, you will emerge into the sunlight of achievement with a power that no man can take from you.
Now we come to a principle that is the very dividing line between the master and the servant, between the leader and the follower. I call it the habit of going the extra mile. When young Napoleon Hill asked me for the most practical secret to rapid advancement, I told him this: you must render more service and better service than that for which you are paid, and you must do it with a positive mental attitude. In my early days as a messenger boy in the telegraph office, I did not merely deliver the envelopes handed to me. I made it my business to learn the names of every prominent businessman in Pittsburgh. I memorized the locations of their offices. I even learned to read the clicking of the telegraph keys by sound, a skill that was not required of me, but one that made me indispensable. I was doing the extra mile before I had a name for it. Most men are content to do exactly what they are told and not a stroke more. They believe they are being clever by giving the least amount of effort for the greatest amount of pay, but they are only cheating themselves of the opportunity to grow. You see, the law of compensation is as certain as the law of gravity. If you perform only that for which you are paid, you have no logical reason to ask for more pay. You have already received your reward. But when you habitually provide plus service, when you look for ways to save your employer money, to improve a process, or to serve a customer with unexpected excellence, you place the world in your debt. You create a reserve of credit that the universe must eventually pay back with interest. I have observed that the world takes off its hat to the man who puts in more than 50% of his capacity, and it stands on its head for those rare souls who devote 100%. The extra mile is never crowded. It is a lonely path at first, but it leads directly to the heights of achievement. By doing more than is required, you develop the most precious of all traits, personal initiative. You become a self-starter. You no longer need a master to stand over you with a whip. You have become your own master. This principle also protects you in times of hardship. When the economy falters and industries must contract, the first to be let go are those who did only what was required. The last to be let go and the first to be promoted when the sun shines again are those who made themselves vital to the organization through extra service. It is a form of insurance that costs nothing but your own effort and a sunny disposition. Remember, however, that the spirit in which you go the extra mile is just as important as the act itself. If you do more than required but do so with a surly face and a complaining heart, you cancel the benefit. The extra mile must be traveled with a smile. It must be an expression of your character, not a calculated bribe for a promotion. When you serve others joyfully, you are not just building a career, you are building a soul. As I wrote in The Empire of Business, do your duty and a little more, and the future will take care of itself. Mastery is not a destination you reach, it is a way of traveling. It is the result of the patient, persistent application of excellence to every task, no matter how humble. If you are a sweeper, be the best sweeper the world has ever seen. If you are a clerk, be the clerk whose books are a work of art. The world is always looking for the man who is better than his job.
I ask you now, do not merely listen to these words, act upon them. Before the sun sets this day, identify one task, however small, and perform it with such excellence and extra care that it surprises those around you. Put your signature of quality upon the world. Now, let us delve into the next great truth. One of the most common failings of men I have observed is the tendency to scatter their fire. They attempt to do a dozen things at once and, as a result, achieve nothing of lasting value. I told Napoleon Hill that the secret to my success and the success of every great industrialist I have known is the law of concentration. I adopted the motto, put all your eggs in one basket and then watch that basket. In your modern age, you are tempted by 1,000 distractions, each claiming a piece of your precious attention. But the mind is like a magnifying glass. It only creates fire when its rays are focused on a single spot. If you move the glass back and forth, you may feel a little warmth, but you will never generate the heat required to melt the steel of opportunity. You must learn to focus your thoughts, your energy, and your capital upon your definite major purpose until you have achieved total mastery over it. When I entered the steel business, I did not dabble in copper, nor did I spend my days speculating in land or grain. I became a steel man.
I studied the chemistry of the ore, the efficiency of the furnaces, and the needs of the railroads until I knew more about steel than any man living. I concentrated my every waking hour on making the best product at the lowest cost. Many of my contemporaries failed because they were jacks of all trades, spreading their resources so thin that the first wind of a financial panic blew them away. Concentration requires the courage to say no to good opportunities so that you may say yes to the best one. It is a form of mental discipline that separates the professional from the amateur. A professional knows that his time is his most limited asset. He does not waste it on idle gossip, petty grievances, or projects that do not align with his central aim. He keeps his eye on the goal with the tenacity of a bulldog. This principle also applies to the mastermind. Once you have focused your own mind, you must focus the collective mind of your alliance. You must ensure that every member of your team is pulling in the same direction. In my mills, we did not have departments working at cross purposes. We had one goal, the production of the finest steel. When you achieve this level of concentration, you create a momentum that is almost impossible to stop. It is the difference between a leaky faucet and a high-pressure fire hose. Patience is the essential partner of concentration. You must be willing to stay with your one basket through the lean years and the trials. Most men abandon their purpose just as they are on the verge of a breakthrough, lured away by some new, shiny object. But the man of character knows that the greatest rewards are reserved for those who persevere in a single direction. Financial independence is not found by jumping from one branch to another. It is found by planting a single seed and tending it until it becomes a mighty oak. I wrote in The Empire of Business that the man who starts several things finishes none. I charge you to look at your life today. Where are you scattering your fire? What baskets are you watching that do not belong to your primary purpose? Cast them aside. Reclaim your energy. Focus your will. When you concentrate your efforts with the intensity of a laser, you will find that obstacles which once seemed like mountains begin to melt away like mist in the morning sun.
I challenge you to stand before a mirror this evening and look yourself in the eye. Ask that person, do I possess the courage to be truly honest with myself? If you cannot answer with a resounding yes, then all the gold in the world will not save you from a poverty of spirit. Now let us examine the seventh principle. In my long life, I have seen many men rise like rockets, only to fall like stones because they lacked the ballast of integral character. They believed that success could be bought with a clever lie or a sharp deal. But I tell you, as I told Napoleon Hill, that the moral law is as fixed and immovable as the stars in the heavens. You cannot cheat the universe. To attempt to build a fortune on a foundation of deceit is to build a cathedral upon a swamp. It may look grand for a time, but its collapse is inevitable. Trust is the very oxygen of the business world. Without it, the machinery of commerce grinds to a halt. When I was building the Carnegie Steel Company, my word was my most valuable asset. If I gave my word on a contract or a price, it was as solid as the rails we forged. This reputation for honesty allowed me to secure credit when others were denied it, and to form alliances with the most honorable men of the age. Character is the only currency that never devalues, even in the darkest of financial panics. You must understand that character is not merely the absence of vice, it is the active presence of virtue. It is the habit of doing the right thing simply because it is the right thing, even when no one is watching, and even when it seems to work against your immediate interest. In my books, I have emphasized that service is the highest form of character. A man of true character seeks to create value for others. He knows that he cannot receive unless he first gives, and that the quality of what he gives determines the quality of what he receives.
One of the 12 riches of life I shared with Hill is the hope of future achievement. This hope is only sustainable if you have a clear conscience. A man who has gained wealth through trickery or by trampling on his fellows is a man haunted by the fear of exposure. He is a slave to his own shadows. But the man of integrity walks with a light step. He is free to focus his entire mind on his definite major purpose because he has nothing to hide. Financial independence is earned slowly through service, patience, and mastery, but it is maintained through character. I have often said that a young man's best capital is his character, not his bank account. If you have a reputation for being industrious, sober, and honest, the capital of others will flow toward you. People want to do business with a man of principle. They want to invest in a man who possesses self-discipline and a positive mental attitude. I charge you to guard your reputation as you would guard your life. Do not be tempted by the quick profit that requires a compromise of your values. In the long run, the man who plays the game fairly and with a generous spirit is the one who wins the greatest prizes. Wealth is a responsibility, and only a man of high character is fit to administer it for the good of his fellow man. Remember, the goal is not just to be a rich man, but to be a great man, a man whose life is a testament to the power of honor and the dignity of labor. I challenge you to look at your neighbors and colleagues not with the eye of a rival, but with the heart of a benefactor. Ask yourself, how can I make the path easier for those who follow me? If you seek only to pull yourself up by pushing others down, you will find the summit a very cold and lonely place indeed. Now, let us speak of the 8th principle, which is the very soul of a life well lived. In my conversations with Napoleon Hill, I often returned to a truth that many find difficult to swallow, that wealth, once accumulated beyond one's own modest needs, ceases to be personal property and becomes a sacred trust. I have lived by the creed that the man who dies rich dies disgraced. This is not because wealth itself is an evil, far from it, but because the hoarding of wealth is a stagnation of the spirit. Money is like the blood in your veins. It must circulate to bring life. If it stops, the body politic withers. I spent the first half of my life accumulating every penny I could, but I have spent the second half distributing it for the benefit of my fellow man. However, I must caution you, there is a great difference between charity and philanthropy. To give a beggar a nickel is often to do him a disservice, for it encourages the very idleness that keeps him in the gutter. True stewardship is the act of placing within the reach of the industrious the ladders upon which they may aspire to rise. This is why I have built thousands of libraries. A library does not give a man a fish, it teaches him how to fish in the great sea of human knowledge. You may say, Mr. Carnegie, I have no millions to give. How can I be a steward? I tell you that stewardship begins with your very first surplus dollar. It is a state of mind. It is the realization that you are part of a larger social fabric. When you use your success to improve your community, whether by supporting a school, beautifying a park, or simply mentoring a young person in the ways of industry, you are practicing the gospel of wealth. This outward focus prevents the master of fortune from becoming a slave to greed. Service, patience, and mastery must culminate in the betterment of the race. If your success does not make the world a more enlightened place, then your success is a failure in the eyes of the Creator. I told Hill that the willingness to share one's blessings is the only way to ensure that the 12 riches remain in your possession. When you give wisely, you create a legacy that outlasts your physical form. Steel rails will eventually rust, and stone buildings will eventually crumble. But the spark of ambition you ignite in a young mind through a book or a lesson will echo through the generations.
Do not wait until you are rich to become generous. Generosity is a habit of the heart, not a calculation of the ledger. A man who is stingy with $100 will be a miser with 100 million. Start where you are. Use your influence to promote harmony. Use your time to serve those who are striving. You will find that as you pour out your energy for the good of others, the universe pours back into you a sense of peace and purpose that no bank account can ever provide. This is the ultimate extra mile, the one that leads from the marketplace to the heart of humanity.
A man's life is but a brief candle, yet the light of his wisdom may shine for 1,000 years through the records he leaves behind. If you find value in these lessons of the soul and the forge, I invite you to join our fellowship by subscribing to this channel, that we may continue to build a foundation of character together. Now, let us conclude our journey with the final and perhaps most vital lesson of all. We have walked through the halls of purpose, discipline, and faith, but here we stand at the threshold of the most profound truth I ever shared with Napoleon Hill, the total ownership of the self. I have lived through the transformation of the world, from the age of hand looms to the age of steel and electricity, yet one thing has remained constant. The man who succeeds is the man who takes full, unmitigated responsibility for his station in life. You are not a victim of circumstances, nor a pawn of the state, nor a prisoner of your birth. You are the architect of your own character and the captain of your own soul. When I was a poor immigrant lad in Allegheny, I could have blamed the economy, the lack of education, or the hardships of my family for any failure. But I realized early on that the world does not owe any man a living. It only owes him an opportunity, and even that he must often create for himself. Financial independence is earned slowly through service, patience, and mastery, but it is realized the moment you decide that you and you alone are responsible for your results. This is the ultimate 12 riches, the mastery of one's own mind. I taught Hill that the mind is the only thing the Creator gave us over which we have absolute control. This is a terrifying thought to the weak, but it is the ultimate liberation for the strong. If you have the power to control your thoughts, you have the power to control your actions, and if you control your actions, you control your destiny. In my mills, I looked for men who had self-reliance. I did not want men who looked for excuses when things went wrong. I wanted men who looked for solutions. The man who says, "I can," and the man who says, "I can't," are both usually right. The path I have laid out for you is not an easy one. It requires the constant application of the master mind, the relentless pursuit of the extra mile, and the unwavering light of a positive mental attitude. But consider the alternative, to live a life of quiet desperation, drifting where the currents of chance take you, never knowing the joy of a task well done or the peace of a conscience well kept. I have tasted the fruits of both struggle and success, and I tell you, the struggle is what gives the success its sweetness. As you go forth from this lesson, do not carry these ideas as mere ornaments of the mind. Wear them as armor. Use them as tools. I once wrote that all honor's wounds are self-inflicted. So too are all honors won, self-earned. Your character is the steel, your purpose is the fire, and your will is the hammer. Shape your life into a masterpiece that serves your fellow man and honors your own potential. The gates of the empire of business are open to anyone with the courage to walk through them with integrity and industry. Remember, my friends, that the accumulation of wealth is a secondary goal. The primary goal is the development of a human being worthy of that wealth. If you master yourself, the world will eventually fall into line behind you. I have left my libraries and my foundations to help you on your way, but the climbing,
The glorious, difficult, necessary climbing is yours to do. Stand tall, act with honor, and let your life be a testament to the power of a disciplined mind.
When I took young Napoleon Hill under my wing, I impressed upon him that the mind is a dual mechanism. It can be a workshop of wonders or a chamber of horrors, depending entirely upon the positive mental attitude you choose to maintain. I have seen men with every advantage, wealth, education, and connections, wither into nothing because they lacked the faith to see through a temporary dark cloud. Conversely, I have seen men rise from the soot of the coal mines to command great industries because they possessed a faith that was more than a mere religious sentiment. It was a living, breathing conviction that they were destined for greatness. Faith is the head chemist of the mind. When faith is blended with the vibration of thought, the subconscious mind instantly picks up the vibration, translates it into its spiritual equivalent, and transmits it to infinite intelligence. You may call it the spirit of the thing, but in the empire of business, we call it the will to win. Without a positive mental attitude, you are defeated before you begin. You will see obstacles where there are opportunities and enemies where there are allies. I never allowed a man with a can't-be-done attitude to remain in a position of authority in my mills. Such a man is a carrier of a mental contagion that can ruin an entire organization. You must cultivate the habit of looking for the equivalent benefit in every hardship, as we discussed. But more than that, you must possess the faith to act before you see the entire path. When I decided to bridge the Mississippi River at St. Louis with steel, many said it was impossible. They said steel was too brittle, too untrustworthy for such a feat. I had no proof other than my faith in the material and the men I had gathered in my mastermind alliance. We moved forward with a positive mental attitude, and the bridge stands to this day as a monument to what a mind filled with faith can achieve. Patience is the byproduct of faith. If you truly believe in the law of compensation and the validity of your definite major purpose, you can afford to wait. You do not become anxious when the seeds you planted yesterday have not yet sprouted into trees today. You know the sun will rise, and you know the harvest will come if you have done the work. This calm assurance is one of the 12 riches of life, and it is worth more than a king's ransom. It allows you to maintain your self-discipline and your concentration when the world around you is in a state of panic. I wrote in The Empire of Business that the man who acquires the ability to take full possession of his own mind may take possession of anything else to which he is justly entitled. This possession begins with a positive mental attitude. You must guard the portal of your mind against the entry of fear, doubt, and envy. These are the poverty thoughts that keep a man small. Instead, flood your mind with the imagery of your success, the joy of your service, and the strength of your integrity. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Financial independence is earned slowly, but it is often accelerated by a flash of applied faith, a moment where you bet on yourself and your vision because you know your character can sustain the burden. Do not confuse this with gambling. A gambler bets on chance. A man of faith bets on the immutable laws of the universe. He knows that if he provides the service and maintains the attitude, the result is as certain as the turning of the tides.